Hello and welcome to the Recruit Rockstars podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. Whether you're venture capital backed or maybe you're bootstrapped, maybe you're even private equity backed, probably the toughest part of your business is scaling the people part, and that's what we're going to focus on over the next 20 minutes with my guest, Mike Shannon. Now, Mike has co-founded and very successfully scaled Packback, a fascinating education-related business, and we're going to talk a bit about the company. He started it about 8 years ago, and so he has scaled it from just an idea, just a little teeny tiny seed, all the way to over 80 people, including along the way, by the way, making a great appearance on Shark Tank. We're going to talk about that too. So with all that, welcome to the show, Mike.
Great, Jeff. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be on here. Big fan of the show.
It's great to have you on. Thank you. So I guess, here's a weird place to start. I guess you were a ball boy for the Chicago Bulls. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
I've never met a ball boy before. And so I've always been curious kind of what that entails. And then how do you make your way from ball boy to founding a company and getting on Shark Tank? There must be a pretty interesting story there as just backstory. And then after that, obviously I'd love to hear about the business itself.
Yeah, sure. Always happy to talk about the inner workings of being a ball boy. Actually, the two worlds overlapped for me. So I became a ball boy with the Chicago Bulls when I was 18, a senior in high school, very, very fortunately. And I continued for 7 years, so until a few years out of college. And we started Packback when I was a senior in college, and went on Shark Tank when I was 1 year out of college. So I'll tell you a little bit about what a ball boy does, but a funny story there is when Shark Tank aired, I was still fully an active ball boy. And the next day, the Bulls were playing the Philadelphia 76ers at home, and I was working. So we had a big viewing party at 1871 for Shark Tank on Friday night, and Saturday by 3 p.m. I was folding towels in the back of the Bulls locker room, and the word had gotten out that the show was coming out because an assistant coach, Mike Wilhelm, great guy, he had seen a commercial and recognized me in that. So an email went out to the whole organization that a ball boy was going to be on Shark Tank. And so a few of the players, including Joakim Noah, ended up tweeting about Packback, which added to the PR that we got from Shark Tank. But yeah, ball boy just kind of makes the behind the scenes work. We're part of basically assistants to the training staff, be it ball boy or ball girl. But assistants to the training staff. So we're setting up the locker room. We're helping make ice bags. We're mixing the Gatorade. And
I'm sure it's nowhere as glamorous as people think.
No. I mean, it's behind all the showcase. There's all the nitty gritty details. But you do have a courtside seat, so that was very glamorous for me, and it was an awesome experience.
You can't buy a PR like that.
Yeah. So the Shark Tank thing, was lucky. We got on the show, and we were right out of school, and Mark Cuban took a liking to us. And it was funny. They didn't show it on air, but it did come up. I said, Mark, you and I had brushed shoulders before in my side job. And he asked me, well, what was that? And I told him a story about being in the Mavericks locker room and waiting to pitch him. So we were really early at Packback, and Mark was there, and I was thinking, I need to go pitch Mark Cuban, and I missed my opportunity. Ball boys aren't really supposed to approach the owners of the opposing team. And so I thought I'd catch him after the game, and the Bulls, out of nowhere, they weren't expected to win this particular game. They beat the Mavericks by like 30 points, and so Mark thought that was funny. He was right out of the game afterwards, so I couldn't catch him, and he remembered that game. So we had that as one connection, along with Casey's negotiation with him, which was pretty.
Yeah, some shared history with Mark Cuban. You could do a lot worse than that.
A very small. We have a very different shared history, but for a small glimpse second, we cross paths.
So let's fast forward to the business, to Packback, based in Chicago, about 80 employees or more. tell people, for the listeners that may not be familiar, what the business is all about. I know it's essentially an online discussion forum for students, but help people understand kind of who's your customer, what's the revenue model, what is the business all about?
Yeah, sure. So, so you're spot on. It's an online discussion technology. The way we approach it is we use discussion as a medium for facilitating an intrinsically motivated learning environment, for fostering some of the active learning components of pedagogy, which are really, really difficult to achieve at scale. And so the technology that we build, we coin as a digital TA. It augments a lot of the tasks that a TA otherwise would do, such as moderating discussion. So we have a series of algorithms that will coach and moderate for quality of question, quality of response. We have a gamification system that gives a score on, we call it curiosity score, on the quality of a question or response. We have a content recommendation engine that curates a newsletter for the students and shows professors a handful of posts that they might want to give custom praise or feedback to. And so all this is in the context of our average course size is 120 students. So if you think about trying to foster, a Socratic learning environment or any traditional, small classroom setting,
It's just not possible.
Layer of scale, every layer of scale, you lose elements of that learning environment. Right. And so Packback, fills those gaps with the technology that we develop.
And this is fascinating. So it's a platform to supplement the in-class learning that a professor and teacher provides, and the students get to learn more from each other. That kind of reinforces that learning. Is that right?
Yeah. So what's occurring every week on our communities, we have 200,000 students this school year using Packback. We're typically adopted as a homework assignment. And so we're a course tool. Students are required, depending on the professor's assignment, to ask one question, answer 2 per week. So the students are engaging with each other. The professor may ask a question or 2 and pin it to the top. But really it's about modeling critical thinking habits at a student-driven level, which creates a very autonomous learning environment because students are the ones going after, their knowledge and their curiosity, as opposed to simply receiving, quizzes and information.
Got it. And this is colleges or high schools too?
We are right now exclusively higher education.
Got it.
And so the growth model, to finish replying to your first question, the growth model is that we primarily consult directly with college professors. So we're present across 220 schools in the US. We consult directly with the professors. We have a team here in Chicago that's typically over video conference and phone, going through the syllabi, going through the pedagogy, and in helping consult with how to adopt Packback as a means to achieve course objectives. And so the professor's the decision maker, students are ultimately the end user along with the professor. And so our 85 plus employees here in Chicago are mostly on the customer side of working with professors.
Terrific. Okay. Now we understand the context of the company. Now let's get into the people part. So you're at 80, did you say 85 people roughly?
Yeah, just over 85. Yeah.
In Chicago. The business over the past, 7-8 years has doubled and doubled and doubled and doubled in terms of headcount. You go from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 20, et cetera. I'm curious, what are some of the unique challenges that take place when a business doubles in terms of headcount? So last year or the year before, you were probably at 40. Year before that, you were at 20. In what ways is the company different when it comes to those nodes?
Sure. Well, the degrees of separation increase is one of the challenges that I've encountered when, it was 15 of us or 4 of us, effectively all in the same room. The context and the learning that's occurring just sort of happens by nature, right? I mean, I might be on a sales call, and by nature, everybody's kind of learning what that call as I'm, failing forward. As the company, goes from the 15 to 30 to 60 to 80 plus, it's the degrees of separation. So things that I would take for granted as well, maybe it's a knowledge set that, well, everybody just knows that. A good example would be educating new hires on who our end user and our customer base is. It becomes so in the weeds that it's second nature that, oh, this is the challenge that professors have. And so developing really the training curriculum is probably the most significant theme that's been
And
on my mind.
do you mean training curriculum for your employees?
Yes,
Got it.
internally.
Got it. So how have you done that? Do you have like a training manager, and what's involved in that so that you make sure that your 85th hire or 90th hire knows as much as your second hire?
Yeah, sure. Well, the actionable takeaway that I can recap is every time something new is being built, to be very conscious to document out how that would be taught to the next person. And so, the one liner that I kind of keep in my mind is you have to blaze the trail and then lay the rail, and laying the rail is really easy to forget. And so how do we do that? It's evolved over time. I mean, it started with literally just kind of sloppy in-person shadows, right? If you're on the customer success side or the sales side, you shadow somebody. Well, okay, that wasn't, working as well. So that turns into Google Docs. That's evolved into, like, we're on basically a learning platform now. We have a whole curriculum of video-based content that breaks down all of the components, especially if you're on the customer facing side of learning. We're still developing this, but learning about the customer, learning about the product, learning, how we fit in to their world. This is a very consultative sale. It's a very consultative customer success role.
Yeah.
And we're working with PhDs across the country. So it's, we are the experts in the niche aspect of what we do, of facilitating active learning at scale.
And they're probably not an easy group to sell to. They're probably pretty data oriented. They want to understand student outcomes.
Exactly, right. So they are definitely the absolute experts in their field.
Yeah.
Many of them are published. They are leaders at a very deep intellectual level. And so, yes, in cracking into the market, our product has been under deep scrutiny. Every professor that uses Packback researches it in some regard. If it's as simple as, some surveys with their students, but as deep as white papers. And as we failed a few of those tests early on, and that had to drive the product roadmap. But then we got to the point where professors were starting to present their research findings of using Packback at conferences. And they help us level up our knowledge set. So we try to capture, really, what are you seeing? How are you using it? And how do we then educate our team on how they perceive what we've built?
It's a huge benefit to having a pretty tough customer, right? Is it holds you accountable and makes you a better company. And I'm curious, the tagline of your company is fearlessly curious. And I'm speculating here, but I'm guessing that you probably hire people that are fearlessly curious. That's probably part of the DNA of the place. Am I right?
Absolutely. So it's one of our core values, and we assess all new hires on our core values. That's the first one.
So before we get to how you assess someone for fearlessly curious, why did you pick that? In other words, when you and your co-founders were sitting down 8 years ago and you said, this is the DNA of our company, how did you arrive at fearlessly curious versus anything else?
Well, Packback entirely pivoted our business model. As we were e-textbook rentals when we were on Shark Tank, and 4 years in, we shifted to, curiosity-driven discussion. There was a lot of soul searching in that time. We actually thought that we were creating, at the time, a Q&A community that would simply live on top of an e-textbook. As we started having professors using, to really our surprise, the Q&A community, which became Packback Questions, simply because it was a better alternative to the learning management system discussion forums. Started studying why that was the case, why they were using it, what the real value was. And it wasn't about answers. The more we thought about it, the more we studied it, the more we looked at it, in the mirror at our own learning journey as entrepreneurs, it was about the questions. And so really viewing the question and habits of inquiry as the central aspect of learning. So seeing that learning starts with questions as opposed to questions are a means to answers and it's all about answers. And so as that train of thought was forming, we kind of centered everything on branding around curiosity. And what happened was actually our team, we probably lost or kind of turned over about 75% of what had been still a pretty small team for Packback Books. And so the whole DNA was something different than people had signed up for, like, plenty of different reasons, but the DNA shifted. And then we had all of a sudden like a new blank canvas to build out our core, which starts with hire people that are fearlessly curious. That's the only way you can, I don't even say sell, you can consult with a professor to adopt a new tool for what they do best, is if you are curious about them.
Tell me about the fearlessly.
Well,
why would I be afraid of curiosity, of being curious?
Well, you could be afraid of doing something differently. We were student entrepreneurs. That takes a lot of curiosity to, kind of go after some unknown thing. And, anytime you're, I think, living truly curiously, you eventually enter some, shadowy unknown place.
Yeah.
And so if you tag fearless onto curious, that's where, you're really going to new terrain.
Yeah, it's the intersection of those two. And so now let's get to the heart of the matter, which is you arrive at this with your co-founders. How do you assess candidates that you're considering to join the team to know if they are fearlessly curious versus full of shit and just telling you what you want to hear?
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't have a complex answer to that. The simplest thing for me is I try to carve out a good chunk of time in any interview for the candidate to ask questions. And, I kind of try to get an understanding of, is one question building to the next, or is it a closed book? What our platform does is coaches open-ended questions. And so am I receiving an open-ended question or a closed-ended question? And so I try to think about that with regards to if they were in a conversation, regardless of the role, with one of our PhD professors with a student. If they're on the customer support side and we have a problem going on, how deep are those questions? And the next thing that I look for is what are you learning on your own? Learning in the classroom is a important part of learning, but also just what are you doing outside of the classroom?
What's the last book that you read? What's the last skill that you developed? That kind of.
Yep. I always ask what books you're reading.
So what you're not doing is saying, are you fearlessly curious? What you're doing is looking for evidence or data points that they genuinely are, right?
Yeah, right.
You can't fake that.
Well, if I asked, are you fearlessly curious? There's a closed-ended question. I get a yes, and I've learned nothing.
Yeah.
If I ask, what are you curious about and how are you exploring it, outside of the classroom, I'll learn a lot. If the answer is I watch a lot of Netflix documentaries, we're probably not moving along. If I, get a response of, a service project that led to a blog that they wrote that led to this and that, like, okay, now we're on to something.
You want people that are almost addicted to learning.
Yes.
Right? It's something that really
absolutely.
turns them on.
Right. And it's for two, it's one, because that will put a proper representation out into the world for Packback, but also it's on team retention. So this is, I think, one of the most rewarding places to work if it's intellectually inspiring and motivating to work with PhDs all day long. However, if it is not, which it's okay if it's not, I won't see somebody last for more than a year. I wouldn't expect to, because it can be grueling. And so if you're obsessed with learning, every day can be fascinating. And now you have an intrinsically motivated teammate. Otherwise, you can get burnt out on PhDs.
And you've done great on Glassdoor. Your ratings are huge, over 4 out of 5. So once they're on board, What is it that makes your best people stay? Why do they, there's always companies that can afford to pay more, give
Sure.
lavish benefits. Why do they stay at PackBack?
Sure. Well, certainly I'm not the ultimate authority on that answer. The team would be, but my vantage point on it is certainly it starts with mission aligned folks, right? And they feel like you come in every day and move the needle a little bit towards some mission that you want to achieve. But from there, it's really what environments are we fostering for growth to occur. When we think about it, there's growth on skill set, there's growth intellectually, there's growth creatively.
Mm-hmm.
And we do some unique things. We have an event that we host just about every month and a half or so called Make Space, which gets about 100 people in the tech community out. It's a creative arts, open mic type, intimate setting event. We've had many, many team members go up and perform their creative gift in front of an attentive audience. And whether or not you're the performer, that creates a connection, the next day at work. We have a series we host called a More Curious Chicago. We have forums that, proactively, like Jessica puts on a whole series of things internally here at PackBack that I think, help facilitate meaningful conversations around our company culture, around where we can improve. We do a company retreat once a year. We do financial town halls so that people understand where we're at and what the task is, so we're in it together.
It sounds like a lot of it's really based on authenticity. I don't want to.
That's fair. Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing you have some pretty nerdy people, and they love their nerdiness and they love what comes with that. So they probably develop a really tight bond with each other.
Well, I think authenticity is definitely the best word to use. I'll hold off on nerdiness. I'll let you be the one that said that.
I'm not calling you a nerd by any stretch. You were a Chicago Bull for a matter of years.
Right.
So I want to circle.
I am nerdy for sure. I just won't. I'll let anybody else on the team self-identify there if they want. But I would say, yeah, we're pretty nerdy, especially around curiosity.
That's great. I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. As the business pivoted from the original model, which was textbook rental that Mark Cuban invested in, you make this difficult decision to pivot the business to this new e-learning platform. And with that came quite a few employee departures. I know you were small at the time. Tell us the story about how that happened. Were these folks that said, I signed up for this, I don't want to be part of this, and they left? Or did you realize that the skills you had hired were no longer relevant and you had to part ways with people?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. The roles that were needed were different. And so there were roles that, with the textbook model, it's that the client relationship is pretty much textbook publishers. And then you have marketing to students, which is managing guerrilla marketing, it's campus ambassadors. And that shifted to really the equivalent of a more B2B sale. Even though we're talking about individual professors, it's account management and then direct account sales. And so like a simple example would be, okay, we needed to now see if we could get PackBack into the first 30 schools. And so we needed people sitting on the carpet with, the founders and on the phones. And so it's hard to just transition a different role into sales. And then there was also, I would say there's trepidation for sure. We were getting a lot of hype, the Shark Tank and everything for where you're going to disrupt textbooks. And all of a sudden we're acknowledging that's not working. We're going to try something else. And there's a lot of trepidation in there. I'm sure there's plenty of sentiment of this is not going to work. 12 months from now, it's going to be history. Yep. And so, for sure we had people that we, could not retain just on whether or not this was going to be a stable job. And so we had to build it from the ground up.
Well, I give you a ton of credit. You have scaled this thing into one of Chicago's fastest growing, most respected technology companies with minimal outside funding, by the way, which is also important to recognize. So congratulations. How do people learn more about Packback or get in touch?
Sure, and thank you for that, and the credits all to the team. How people can learn more about Packback, www.packback, P-A-C-K-B as in boy, A-C-K.co. That's our website. Co-founders Mike Shannon, Casey Gandam, Jessica Tenuta, Nick Courier. And then also you can learn a little bit if you want to come visit Packback, makespacechicago.org.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for making the time.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you having me on.